It is a first down. Pirates.
You can paint this one purple. What an incredible win by the ECU Pirates.
Welcome into Blackbeard's Alley, a Pirate football podcast presented by L&K Custom Homes. We appreciate everyone tuning in. East Carolina goes to Conway, a first regular season matchup between the Pirates and Shants, and ECU was victorious 38-0. And Pirates left a lot on the table, and we'll dive into it in the first half. ECU led just 10-0 at halftime, but really wore Coastal down in the second half, particularly in that fourth quarter, scoring 21 points and blanking the shots there on the surf turf. And right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host Jason Tyndall. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing good, Bubba. Thanks, man. Always good to come back again for the podcast after another Pirate victory. So makes our Mondays together a lot more enjoyable, that's for sure.
Yeah, fun environment there in Conway, as you see with that picture on the screen for our viewers on YouTube. East Carolina posting its first road shutout and also first shutout of an FBS opponent since 2000 when ECU went to Wallace Wade and blanked the Blue Devils 38-0. Yeah, it was a solid atmosphere. The Coastal crowd was pretty much taken out of it pretty quickly, but overall can't complain. And the folks were hospitable and everything ran pretty smoothly from a game day operations standpoint as far as getting into the stadium. My dad, as some of our listeners may know, he had knee replacement surgery about 7 weeks ago there in late July, and we were able to catch a shuttle with no problem from the handicap lot about 2 miles from the stadium. And then the free concessions, which was a big deal, this all season and going into the first couple games for the Chanticleers, that was very well organized. And I went right before the game and then also just before the second half started, and I was able to grab my nachos and drink and didn't have to wait at all. But moving back to the game itself, we opted to receive and then had a pretty unusual situation there on a 4th and 2 early. What was your take on that scenario?
I think, to be honest with you, I like the fact that we're looking for ways to manufacture momentum early in a game like we were against Coastal. Still it's a road game, a team that has a lot of talent. They're not playing up to their talent right now, but I think the staff is showing their ability to be creative. And to be honest, it was really a fault of the American Conference referees. They didn't manage the situation well and didn't kind of, to me, it personally exposed them a little bit. They didn't understand the dynamics of what was going on. And I'm not sure if Coach Harrell had to share it with them pregame about what's going to happen, but it seemed to catch them, without their full awareness of that ball should have been snapped, and it should have been a situation that put us in an advantage. But I enjoy the fact that we have a head coach right now who seems to say, let's do things we can to win and not try to prevent a loss. And you can tell the team's playing that way. Now, on the concession side, Bubba, I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard the food was not very good. I heard it was cold cheese. I heard all this stuff. And I want to just say real quick, the people who worked their tails off for us in Dowdy-Ficklin every Saturday were there trying to get people in the gates, trying to get people to their seats, trying to provide food and beverages and things like that. Part of the problem is a lot of times the masses are coming in as the pregame's already started. And to manage that from a ticket perspective is a challenge in itself. So I think we could, as fans, filter how we get into the game a little bit better as well. And that maybe would remove some of that negativity. But I'm glad to hear that your dad had a great experience coming from the lot where you guys were able to park, and was able to get to the game and watch ECU blank somebody for the first time in 25 years, which is kind of nuts, but it's the reality of the world today. And there's very few shutouts a weekend, because if you look, we were one of 6 shutouts over the entire landscape of college football for the weekend as far as 1A football.
Yeah, as far as the food, very quickly, the hot dogs definitely left something to be desired. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say the hot dog was about a 3 or 4, and that's probably being generous. But I had no issue with the nachos. No, the cheese wasn't necessarily hot, but it was. I've certainly had much worse nachos at ballparks and stadiums, and then the drinks. They were. I mean, obviously that's something that's tough to mess up, but it, you can get drinks that are very watered down, but they did an excellent job of having those drinks fresh and lined up where you could just grab it and go.
Perfect. Sounds like a good idea to me.
But taking a look at some of the numbers in this game, ECU ran 86 plays, 36 passes, 49 runs, and I know that may be slightly off, just depending on depending on how things are charted. If it's called a pass and Caton Hauser pulls it down and run, which didn't happen a lot because he was very well protected. The run blocking, on the other hand, is something that it just seems like it's one thing or another there until the fourth quarter that was preventing much more than 2, 3, 4 yard gains. Very much like the game against Campbell, where you see the Pirates finish with 172 yards. In this game, ECU finishes with 204. It's kind of misleading. It's still great production at the end of the day, but there's still a lot of hay that needs to be made in that area.
Yeah, and I'm very repetitive in some of my thoughts because I feel like that group itself is unique compared to probably most other position rooms in football, because they have to work together so well. And I truly believe Coach Maddox, his group, it's going to take time, but it's going to be one of those deals. The way I look at it, it's going to be one of those deals where, as the season progresses and we get into American play, we'll we'll increase that average yards per rush from 3.4, 3.5 yards per rush to 4, 4.5, something like that. And it's going to play off of the success of the passing game and better to get people downfield and get people open. So that's going to then help the front, play a little, I don't want to say different, but we've got to give those guys more of a chance to get gelled and working together. And it's the same song I've been saying since the NC State game. I mean, if you think about it, Bubba, you take that first quarter and half an NC State game away and just say we get 1 or 2 drives in that first quarter and a half, we're probably sitting here at 3-0 right now. I truly believe that. And you look at what they've done since we played them. They're a pretty good football team. They're not a BCS caliber, playoff team, but they're a good football team and they're undefeated. And we had them on our heels at the end of the game. And our offensive line is significantly better today than it was 28, 21 days ago, whatever it was when we opened up the Labor Day weekend in Carter Finley.
Yep. And from a coaching perspective, tell our listeners, it's a fine line there between you're not going to abandon the run, especially when it's such a big part of what you do. It was very apparent that the passing game was there, pretty much at will. Caton Hauser, 28 out of 37, 293 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have his first interception of the season, just kind of an ill-advised and poor throw, as he stated after the game in his remarks to the media. But and almost, along those lines, +7 in the turnover battle thus far. That is ECU's only turnover to date. But Anthony Smith, 11 for 136, and we'll dive into some more of the numbers in a moment. But kind of where I was going with that is just from a coach's standpoint, just when the run game's struggling like it is, as far as staying with it and committing to it, even when it is ugly and frustrating, when you're getting stopped on 3rd and 4th and short, just give our listeners and viewers your thoughts there as far as that fine line between turning to the pass and then staying committed to the run.
It's a mindset. You want to be physical up front on both sides of the football, and including, I would say, all three sides, including special teams, because special teams are violent plays as well. When you do start stepping away from that, and when you're leaning heavy towards the pass, you allow the defense to actually dictate what you're doing. You allow them to change the body types they're putting up front. They're putting more athletic guys up front, maybe a little lighter in the butt, as we used to say, guys with skinny ankles that can really run. And you then put yourself in a bind because there's not that threat of what are we going to do in the box as far as a stopping the run concept. And I think you saw a little bit of that with NC State last year in the first half. They were doing some different things, and it put them in a compromise in the bowl game from a running standpoint. You saw Caton pulling the ball and taking advantage of that on the edges and the angles he had. You do not abandon the big guys up front. You've got to let them eat a little bit, and they will eventually come together. We're playing so many guys this year compared to years, seasons of the past. They're developing depth. They're developing people who can plug and play, but there's going to come a point where they start working well together, and that's going to then really open up everything else from the offense, from a vertical passing game, short mid-range, the stuff across the middle, the digs, the drags, the shallows, because the linebackers are having to step up on snap and not just kind of sit on their heels and start playing at depth and taking away some of those underneath routes, which then creates problems for your safeties and your corners in coverage.
I believe it was the second snap of the game. We addressed the, quote, bozo play in the scenario that Blake talked about at his Monday press conference where we had 4th and 2. There'd already been a timeout. You cannot call back-to-back timeouts, so we were trying to capitalize on that. And we had the punt team. We brought the punt team off, sent the offense back on, and everything played out. And definitely encourage our listeners to check out Blake's detailed description of that situation in the press conference. But prior to that, after gaining a first down, on our first play from scrimmage, we went tempo. We went an unbalanced line. The ball was on the right hash. We put trips into the boundary, and then went and so we had only a guard to the right of the center, and we ran an outside zone play. I think maybe gained 2 or 3 yards, but it was one of those plays that as the offensive line continues to gel, I love the creativity there, going tempo where they don't have a chance to react and possibly bust them big.
Yeah, we're sitting here having this conversation, which I think is really good for everybody in Pirate Nation, because we're talking about things that we're doing differently and not just beating our head against the wall. But number 2, we're talking about coming off a road win against a regional opponent who's had tremendous amount of success. They actually beat BYU, if you guys don't remember, on a Thursday night ESPN or Tuesday. It was a weird ESPN last-minute game where they flew across the country and played Coastal. My point being is we're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole or vice versa. We are doing things differently. We're making it fun for the players. And, I just feel like, much like some of the receivers that we've talked about already in earlier podcasts and some of the guys on defense, the offensive line is just going to continue to mature. And if you look at the number of offensive linemen we're playing in each game, that's just going to help us in the long run. So we're planting those seeds now to have that crop of, the ability to run the football, which, again, not to be repetitive, but it's going to open up everything else from the passing game, from the mid, short, and long, the deep vertical stuff.
And there, on that initial possession, we did have to punt, but after that, we very quickly, went down the field. We ended up, once again, being aggressive on 4th down instead of kicking a chip shot field goal that would have been probably about, 22, 23 yards. I think we had 4th and 2 on the Coastal 6. We I think it was maybe out of a timeout. We ran a slant route to Yannick Smith. Caton put it on him, and from that point, we went up 10-0, and really had a chance to go up 17-0 there mid-second quarter or early second quarter, and unfortunately, I'm trying to remember if that was the blocked field goal or a turnover on downs. I think that was a turnover on downs, and then Coastal goes down. And we had a huge play here by Jamarly Riddle. And Jamarly is there on the defensive left hash. We were showing a too high look prior to the snap. And then on the snap of the ball, you see Coastal in the 2x2 set, 2 receivers to each side. And then Jamarly Riddle, rolled to the middle of the field to a single high safety look, and what I assume was probably cover 3. But at any rate, he made an excellent play on the post route. You had a post wheel combination to each side.
Yeah, that's the piece that Blake Harrell and Josh Aldridge's defense creates issues as well. They're showing what right here looks to me like possibly some sort of quarters coverage or a very loose cover 2. And then, now the quarterbacks and the receivers are thinking, okay, these routes are going to be the ones that are going to break open. And like you said, Jamari rolls to the middle of the field, playing the middle high safety, and makes a great play on a ball. And it could have been 1 or it could have been 3, but I didn't get a chance to go back and rewatch it in real time as far as watching what actually happened. But he's definitely a special player for us, and that helps us be more creative on defense in the back end as well. And I believe that's going to pay off, Bubba, this coming week, not to get too far ahead, but we got a true freshman quarterback coming in Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium. And, he hasn't had to do a whole lot of adjusting to, showing a cover shell to run on a different shell after the snap of the ball, especially one as drastic as this. And it's something that we started actually doing my last year as a high school coach, was showing a 4 deep or a 2 high safety look, and then roll into a 1 or 3. And it was fruitful for us, even though we were kind of outmanned at that point in the year. But we still had some picks because of that, because it does confuse the quarterbacks quickly.
Yeah, definitely make a young quarterback, see how good he is with his eyes, and then also how good the receivers are at recognizing coverage. And Jamarly Riddle made a heck of a return, 35 yards to around our own 40 there following the pick. And then to very quickly plug our interview that will be dropping later in the week with Greg Wrubell. We spoke with him earlier on Monday afternoon. He is the director of broadcast media in the 25th year play-by-play voice of the BYU Cougars. But what were your general thoughts at halftime when the Pirates went in 10-0, and you really felt like it should have been probably 20 or 24-0?
But we have to kind of level set at times as ECU fans and remember where we've come from to where we are now. And I'll be honest with you, I'm going to use the word pissed, because I felt like we left a lot of points on the board. We left them in the first half. Like, we didn't take advantage of the opportunities we've had. And previously under Coach Harrell, we've been kind of the hammer as opposed to the nail. And I felt like we were kind of deciding which tool we're going to be. We're going to be the nail or the hammer. And the game should have been out of control or out of hand at that point for Coastal. Then I had to say to myself, isn't it nice to be up 10-0 at halftime on the road in a nighttime game with a decent environment and be frustrated? And it's because our expectation for what our football program and what means so much to us is changing again back to the days that we all reminisce about, when every Saturday or every Thursday night you felt like ECU had a chance to win no matter who we were playing. And so our expectations are risen. Coach Harrell's created an expectation for the team that's risen. And to me, that's exactly the way it should be. We should be frustrated. And I could tell they were frustrated too at halftime by what he talked about from their conversations with the team, the adjustments they made, and just, what I guess the challenge is this is part of evolution of the change back to being a really competitive football team each weekend we play, whether we win or lose. That's all we can ask for these young men and for this coaching staff is to give us a chance to win. And that's where we're heading towards.
Yeah, a lot of people, we saw how aggressive Blake Harrell and this staff was after he became the interim head coach. And then after the interim tag was removed prior to the Navy game, would we continue to see that aggressiveness? We did against Navy, and we did in the bowl game. And then folks were like, well, will we see it this year when he's the head coach from the jump? And we have, and we have in a big way. And we saw a fake punt against NC State, about our own 25, 30-yard line, something like that. And it was really something like Coach Logan would have done back in the day. And then you saw what we did on the first possession the other night, and you've seen other wrinkles as well. And I love to see how aggressive we are. And for the most part, with maybe an exception or two, I've loved these calls.
Yeah, it's calculated. There's a lot of time that goes in with the staff to talk about when is it right to do this, when's it not. But you summed it up. I'll just share this. I was walking on a long walk Saturday, and a buddy of mine who's not an ECU fan sent the clip of Coach Logan talking about at ECU, you go for it every time. You go for it. And I just said, my girlfriend, by the time we got back to our house from a long walk, she'd heard that thing probably 60 times in a row. And because that's what it's like to be a Pirate. And I'm not saying we got to go back to Coach Logan. We're not in a revisionist history, but it truly is the way we should approach our football program and how we call a game. We should do everything we can to create chaos, confusion, and be the aggressor. At no point should we be passive. And that's not the way Pirates are. And that's not the way we expect our football team to play. And I believe that Coach Harrell has embraced that and realizes I get a few hall passes because I'm going to be a little bit more of a renegade and take chances because ECU thrives on that. We'd rather have that happen and not work than to be inside zone first down, inside zone second down. It's second and 10, inside zone third down, and then punt. That's not how we work here. That's not going to work for East Carolina in Pirate football.
Something else, very quickly to piggyback on one of your points as far as just the general mindset of our program and some of the philosophical changes. Coach Harrell has said on numerous occasions about his relationship that he's developed, especially since he got the head job, with Cliff Godwin, who's had so much success. And you hear Coach Godwin say all the time, this is no disrespect to our opponent, but I'm really focused on us. You've heard Coach Harrell say that several times. You've heard assistants say it. You've heard a lot of the players say it when they've been speaking with the media. So I think that's definitely worth noting.
Yeah. And how many times do you listen to one of the player press conference interviews and they're repeating this? It's not, I don't even think it's coach. I think it's culture. It's got to be culture. That's the only way that works. And one of the things they did again this weekend, and I said it at the Campbell game, I'm saying it again this week. So again, repetitive. They're building culture. We're playing 30 people on both sides of the football. It's not just a starter who's playing the entire time. We're rolling people in at all the position groups to create depth, create experience, create culture. And that's so powerful. I felt like we lost that a little bit over, a 10-year period. We had some spurts of success when we had some really good talent and there's almost no way to screw that up. But I feel like this is it's a genuine scenario where Coach Harrell and his staff have done a good job of play the next play, play the next opponent, worry about the next down, and let's go after and attack their ass when we can, and make it uneasy for defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, whoever it might be, special teams coordinator, to prepare for us because we're not going to sit back and wait for things to happen. We're going to go try to create chaos and create success.
Yeah, along the lines of what you're saying, I love late in the game. You saw Mike Wright, his explosiveness, 3 carries, 37 yards in that I think it's right around a 20-yard touchdown. And then T.J. Engelman got in there, put it in the box, as Blake Carroll likes to say. And then also, I'll tell you, DeJuan Lacey, he runs hard.
Yeah, we've got some young talent, and right now we're with a situation we've run into with the young man being asked to leave the program, and then an injury we have as well. We're fortunate we have that stable of running backs, and there's a lot of people who say, "Hey, make one person the horse." I don't believe in that, not in today's game, especially not as fast as we play and snap the football. But yeah, it definitely is a place that, if you watch our players and watch their body language, they just seem to be having a good time and having a good time together. And that's fun as an East Carolina fan, because we've seen the opposite of it before, and that's not a fun feeling.
Yeah, Mike Wright, he spoke with the media on Monday, and he seems to be the epitome of a team guy. And he said when I score or when Caton scores, he said it's not me scoring, it's not Caton scoring, it's East Carolina scoring, it's we scoring. So, with that being the case, and you see the night that Anthony Smith had 11 catches for 136 yards, no touchdowns, but he was close on the tunnel screen, got knocked out at the 2 or 3 yard line, and Parker Jenkins ended up scoring. And then Yannick Smith only had 25 yards, but 2 touchdowns. And then Brock Spalding had another solid game with 4 catches. We really left a lot out there in the passing game. There were 2 or 3 deep balls that Caton just underthrew a little bit that I know you'll hit on as the season progresses.
Yeah, I think it was more of a footwork thing with him on those throws. I'm sure if you could get those back, we'd probably connect on both of them. Which then, what happens with East Carolina, we start hitting those deep balls and all the other stuff, it becomes crazy up there in the stands, and the energy behind that. So it's unfortunate we didn't connect on those, but it just seemed to me like he was off on his footwork a little bit early on, much like the NC State game early on. And those are things you can tell he's just business. He'll correct those. But we've got a lot of talent at receiver. I just cannot wait to see what happens as we continue to mature through this season, towards the end of the season, what our football team looks like. It just seems positive. And I'll just say this: there was a team that was really good and talented. I'm not going to say what year, but most of the folks can connect the dots here. I felt like at the end of the year, we somewhat lost that at the senior level of leadership. I don't see this happening under Coach Harrell. I think he has a different relationship with the players. But, I remember going to a senior day game and feeling like, what in the heck just happened to our football program in 1 week? And it was chaos and leadership. And I just feel like this is more natural and more organic and more it's a realistic culture in the locker room that would probably make something like that more difficult for people to start creating that negativity.
Up to this point, outside of Jamarly Riddle's interception, we've spent a lot of time talking about the offense. We have to give a ton of credit and time to the defense. 39 pass attempts for Coastal, and Tad Hudson was pressured on 32 of those 39. Just remarkable. Yeah.
People on the edge, and then also they made some changes up front, putting JD inside. I think he's really tough for an interior offensive lineman to block in a pass rush scenario. He's got that quickness, and he has that leaner body type. It also goes back to, if you think about the pressure, some of that translates to the back end, to the back five there with the nickel and the safeties and the corners. So evidently people were not breaking, people were not open early enough. So that gives you the time to launch into off the platform to become a true rusher of the quarterback. And it was nice to see him under duress. That's going to be the key to this weekend's game with BYU. Can we make that young player Bear? I love the name Bear, and I love the fact he's number 47. But can we get him off schedule and make him have to start looking downfield and start hitting him a little bit with the guys that we've recruited over the years on the edge? position and also the interior defensive line.
Yeah, in addition to those 32 pressures on 39 pass attempts, ECU registered 5 sacks, forced 5 turnovers, 9 TFLs.
Yeah, that's what we going into a game like this with a team that's probably struggling a little bit, granted they're still talented, this is the type of production we should get from our front. And I give a ton of credit to Coach Tesh and his group, because they play with that relentless energy. And again, back up to the secondary, they're doing their job as far as covering people on the early on the snap and not allowing people to run free. So the quarterback, their first read, if their first read's not there, life gets really difficult for a quarterback. And you know that, Bubba, from playing the position in the past. If you pre-snap read, anybody can play 7-on-7 pre-snap read. But when you're having to move across the field or move to a different person, you start realizing, hey, there's some other dudes that weigh a whole lot more than me who are pretty athletic. They probably can dunk a basketball, who are trying to knock my damn head off right now. So I got to get this ball out of my hands quick or start running, one or the other.
Yeah, no doubt. That mental clock going off, as you mentioned. One of the guys that Blake Harrell had mentioned after the Campbell game, Kendrick DeJure, the Sam Houston State transfer edge rusher. Of those 5 sacks, he had 1.5. You also had Josiah Robinson, who I know you thought would really have a breakout senior season, a coming out party, if you will. And then J.D. Lampley, he also had a sack. And J.D.'s always he's Mr. Excitement. He and Preston Carr.
Yeah, they are. I love watching those two dudes play. They just get after it pretty well. And having Kendrick, he has a different body type too, and that can make an offensive tackle's life really difficult because he's so long and lean and just quick. And so I feel like that we have the perfect blend right now, the perfect buffet for us Eastern North Carolina folks to be successful on the defensive front. We just got to stay healthy, stay fresh, and stay excited, and just keep bringing it. But that's why I love watching Tesh run those guys on and off the field, because they're just getting those fresh bodies out there. So that NASCAR is running on wide ass open gas and not just leaking fuel and trying to limp around the track.
Let's also mention Kieran Davis. Davis was honorable mention, American Conference Honor Roll with a couple of TFLs. And then also it's still crazy to me, even though it's been happening for years now. But you think back when football was played more in the box and not so wide open, not being snapped as many times. And you think of guys like Robert Jones and Jeff Carr, et cetera. Mark Libiano, 130, 140, 150 tackles. You look at a box score now, and the Pirates had 46 tackles on Saturday night. There were only 2 guys that had more than 3 tackles. And none had more than 5. Just remarkable.
Yeah, the space they play in now is so different. You look at how they spread the field, and even high school, they're trying to get the outside wide receivers almost on the sideline. So it just stretches the amount of ground that they have to cover from a secondary and inside linebacker, outside linebacker perspective. So I think the days of having those type of numbers that you referenced are probably in the past for us. You're not getting 22 personnel and first down run, second down run. Everybody's playing within a 15-yard box of each other. Like Mark Libiano would be a rusher now, if that. I mean, he's a great player, unbelievable. Those guys like that would not be. They're not. If you look at our inside linebackers, typically they don't even look the same anymore. They look more like big safeties that can run, but also fill the gaps and cover down if they need to.
Wrapping up our talk about Coastal, and then we'll very quickly touch on BYU. But you had a 24-yard field goal blocked there late in the first half. That was off the left hash, and Coach Harrell said it's a situation. One of our wing tripped, and that led to the block. It appeared to also potentially be a low kick. But your thoughts on the special teams? You had a quality return by Kyler Pearson. I think it ended up being 20 yards, but it would have been even more had it not been for an illegal block.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a big fan of him and his ability to just be a specialist and take tremendous amount of pride in being the best he can. He's going to help us at some point this year. He's going to create some dynamite momentum for us. Let me just be candid and honest. Having field goals blocked and PATs blocked is Bush League, and it's got to stop. And I've been saying that for years. It's unexcusable. I don't give a damn who tripped or what. That ball should not be blocked, and it happens too much for us. And I know Coach Harrell probably, he and I both already lost our hair, so he's probably not losing hair over it. But he'll say the same thing. That operation has to be nearly perfect, especially in chip shot scenarios. It has to be perfect. It has to be a 3. Instead, it became a -7, as Logan used to say. We came away with no points because somebody didn't operate appropriately. And we've got a special teams what was it, like a analyst or something that's in charge of it. Who's responsible? That stuff is this, out of everything that happened on Saturday night. That was the piece that I just had a hard time going to sleep over, watching that happen again. And it's almost like a cloud over East Carolina football with the kicking game and especially the PAT field goal operation. But it's got to stop. They've got to clean that up, and it's got to be automatic. So I'll leave it at that. I've been saying that for years. I thought for years I don't get, from being a coach, I don't get it how that continues to happen.
Yeah, fortunately, when the Pirates didn't allow it to snowball, although we didn't score on our first possession of the second half, we did on the second possession, and then there in the fourth quarter, we really just wore Coastal down. I mentioned the 5 turnovers. The Pirates were the beneficiary of short fields, and to our credit, we capitalized, and it went from 17-0 to 38-0, and quite a hurry there. But moving on to BYU, the Cougars, 2-0, coming off an open date. They are allowing just 1.5 points per game, no matter how soft the schedule's been against Portland State and Stanford, and that certainly jumps out. And then they're allowing just something like 7 rushing yards per game and only 99 total yards.
Yeah, tough game. I would rather it be a noon game, but I'm glad it's 7:30 because half of Pirate Nation will be so lubed up and wild and going into that stadium. I feel like it's going to be a great atmosphere. They've got a really good football team. They're big up front. They always are. They're very confident that I believe their coach has done what we're talking about doing. He's established that culture again at BYU. The piece that I think it goes in our favor is I don't care who you are. If you're a true freshman quarterback and you really haven't been pushed yet, can we make him beat us? And that's the key to it. And can we run the football well enough to keep them from doing some unique things with bracket coverage or walking people down in the box, things like that, and make them respect the vertical game, but also the crossing routes and things like what Petaway and Brock Spalding and Waiters and those guys. Yep,
stopping the run well enough so Bear Blockmeyer's put into some third and long situations, and we're able to generate some pressure, and then, like you say, being able to run the football well enough where we're not one-dimensional, because this is a game. Obviously, I'd be extremely surprised if we're able to run for anything like we had the last 2 weeks. But if we can have some semblance of a ground attack, run for right around 100 yards, that would be that would go a long way.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's no doubt we definitely cannot abandon the run regardless of what's happening. You've got to continue, like I said, keeping them honest. And the last point I want to make about the game is this is a chance for all of us fans to truly become that 12th man, as Texas A&M says, and create an environment hostile be respectful, be, sportsmanship, et cetera. But it's nighttime, long day of tailgating, nationally ranked opponent, a national brand, ESPN labeled P4. We've been left out to date so far. What better day to be an East Carolina Pirate football fan than be in Dowdy-Ficklin this Saturday night and be there for during the daytime tailgating and stuff with your friends. But we need to show up and we need to be engaged and loud and create as much chaos as we can from a crowd perspective and do everything we can to help these players come out victorious over a very good BYU team. They're what were they last year? 11-2 or something like that.
11-2, and over the last 5 seasons, they've won somewhere between 70 and 75% of their games under Kalani Sitake, who's now in his 10th season in 2025. Hard to believe, because after going 9-4 in year one, after taking over for Bronco Mendenhall, they went 4-9 and had the worst offense in BYU history when the Pirates beat them back in 2017. But boy, has he turned it around, and they're very happy with Mr. Sitake out in Provo, and hope he's the coach of the Cougars for a long time. But as we wrap up this show, some final thoughts. I'd definitely echo everything you say, Jason, as far as the crowd. Of course, the capacity of Dowdy-Ficklin's 51,500. A friend told me, I guess on Sunday evening, that he had seen on social media that there was somewhere like 1,500 to 2,000 tickets remaining as far as single game sales. And, hopefully that's the case. Definitely no excuse, in my opinion, for it not to be sold out, and just a very rowdy atmosphere under the lights on Saturday night. Be sure to check out Sights and Sounds from down in Conway. We have, I think it's right around 15 minutes of Sights and Sounds from the Pirates' 38-0 win over Coastal Carolina. And then check out our conversation with the play-by-play voice of the BYU Cougars, who's in his 25th season there in Provo, calling the action for BYU football, and that is Greg Wrubell. We'll drop that sometime on Tuesday. But for my co-host, Jason Tyndall, I'm Bub Rosenbaum. You've been watching and listening to Blackbeard's Alley. We'll talk to you soon, and as always, go Pirates.
And it's purple all night long in Eastern North Carolina.